College football nerds here talking Indiana, Ohio State recap. A lot of Ohio State fans asked for us to talk. I think this was in the middle of the game when y'all were giving us a what the hell is going on, guys. Supposed to win this one comfortably. Started out that way. We thought we might, and we didn't. So Josh and I are here to talk about it because we are unbiased, uninvested observers. And Josh, the model went perfect. Like I think the model was 45-31. It was right on it. We weren't buying the model because we felt like, okay, Rutgers put some points on late. Turns out Rutgers' offense isn't terrible. Rutgers puts it on late. We've had a little bit of that this year. And so maybe this was really not the game that the model predicted. Turns out it kind of was and it wasn't. I think that we didn't anticipate a lot of the bombs that they gave up. And that's really what I want to start with. And I want you to get into it. I'm going to set it up for you, and I want you to get into it. I felt like there was this real scheme failure from the Ohio State coaching staff, and maybe this is a personnel situation. We looked it up before we started talking. Indiana is the 125th best run team in the country. Penix doesn't run the ball that much. So there's not a real QB bail threat. 125th best run team in the country. Not a threat to run. They're playing single high all night. Don't adjust at all, and their corners are getting walked. Josh, do you think this was a failure from the coaching staff to not adjust, or just came in with the wrong scheme to begin with? Get us into it.
I really think it's a combination of the two, right? I mean, Ohio State's base scheme right now relies on Malik Hooker to be single high safety, and they play three corners a lot. And the reality for that is they're constantly giving single coverage somewhere on the field. So frequently in that game, you saw Indiana make a big play, like Freifogel or somebody else. One in particular where he catches a ball over Sean Wade. Wade falls down, and he runs the rest of the way for a touchdown. Most teams, when you're getting lit up like that, you got two safeties. I mean, if it doesn't matter if Wade misses the deflection, it doesn't matter that Wade falls down, because that enough stuttering lets the safety come over, make the tackle. You live to play again, and you got 25 yards to stop them and kick a field goal. And in modern football against elite teams, you make most of your stops in the red zone. Good offenses are able to use the RPO to strain you and get one-on-one opportunities, but I don't think it could be any more clear that the losses that Ohio State had in the secondary, not having Arnett, not having, the ability to lock up Okudah on a receiver, have just drastically affected the way the defense is being able to effectively play. And given that Indiana couldn't run the ball, I mean, I was just baffled at why they didn't take somebody out of the box, put another safety on the field, and do split safeties. Keep somebody over the top. If you bust a play, that's okay. You make the tackle. You live to play again. Don't give up bomb after bomb after bomb, and don't leave yourself in a situation where you're letting, like Malik Hooker have to be one-on-one on a guy, or you're leaving Wade, who, I'm going to be honest, he's lost himself a lot of money where he's having to play man coverage as a boundary corner, and as it turns out, he's more of a safety. It's one thing not to see that, on the onset. It's one thing to have the scheme, and it's another to have this happen over and over in a game and never make the adjustment to realize the personnel problems you have and just make a simple switch to get things fixed.
And that's what we've seen this year, using Alabama as an example. They've had some first halves where they struggled, and they've made really good second half adjustments. We saw this against Georgia. We even saw it at Ole Miss. Ohio State fans keep bringing up the Ole Miss game as an example of Alabama's defense is just as bad. Right now, they're not. And here's the thing. Ohio State's run defense is better than Alabama's. But to beat an elite offense, you have to be able to throw the ball. And Alabama's pass defense is far superior right now to Ohio State's. And I think some of it is scheme related. And you talk about, at this point, this is a scheme and that's what they've got. But it's interesting to me because, again, using Alabama, Nick Saban is a 3-4 guy 3-4 his entire career, but he has had to adjust. Even though he recruits to a 3-4, he has had to adjust. Really, Alabama's base scheme is a nickel. Like, that's a nickel team right now, given the landscape of offenses in college football this year. And the entire Ohio State defensive staff needs to be able to see on tape that the 125th best run offense in the country is not going to run on you. And we got to put in a program for the week, because the only way Indiana is at all in that game is if they hit multiple shots. Indiana is never going to be an Auburn that beats Alabama by getting 4 or 5 yards a carry over and over and over again. That's what we've seen them do. That's how they've beaten some of these really good teams in the past. Indiana was the only way was haymakers. And so you've got to know that that's where you're susceptible, and playing single high safety is not really going to help you there. So on the flip side, there's a lot of talk about Justin Fields, and this is another one I want you to get into. People were just crushing Justin Fields for these interceptions in the first half, and I think that this was not the Justin Fields. It wasn't an opportunity to show Justin Fields, the one that we know. And some of it is because he's faced such poor competition so far this year. Talk a little bit about what you saw in terms of, the limitations he had in this game, and maybe how it might be a little fool's gold, and he's actually a much better quarterback than he was able to show in this game.
I think the reality is that Fields did struggle with reads. Now, we saw this a lot with Tagovailoa at Alabama, that he would predetermine his throws early on. And just like with Tua, there's a lot of RPO concepts where you end up with a lot of one-on-one coverages most of the time. What Indiana was able to do was similar to me with what Clemson did in 2018 against Alabama, where they took this phenomenal offense and just shut them down. They handled the run with limited numbers, and they were able to occasionally drop safeties or linebackers and cheat a guy deep in pass coverage. And if Fields tried to get greedy with that throw to his RPO seam route or what have you, it's going to get picked. One of the tough things that happens sometimes for quarterbacks, especially when they don't, in these kind of games, is you're used to throwing and going, okay, if I hit my guy receiver is going to beat their DB. And if I make the right throw on this route, I'm going to have a big play. And you do it over and over. Sometimes in the game of football, if you make the perfect throw and he beats the receiver, it's an interception anyway, because they got a guy rolling over in coverage or dropping back. And we saw that. We saw a safety rolling over, get a pick. You saw, a guy rolling back from the line of scrimmage from Indiana getting an interception. And Fields just didn't read those very well in the same way Tua didn't. So I think that was kind of his problem in this game.
And isn't this, as an extension of that, some of the problem you bring up Tua? That's a good point. Alabama in 2018 didn't play anybody that was good until they got into that Georgia game where Tua got hurt, and Tua didn't look great. He was making some bad reads. Tua's first read was always there. Third down, RPO slant for a first down was always there. And we saw this back-to-back on the same drive. Olave, first read, third down, RPO slant was right there every time. How much of this is not even about Justin Fields, and it's about the fact that Ohio State never plays teams, and this is just part of being elite. This isn't a shot at the Big Ten. This is I've already made the Alabama example. They never play teams that are good enough to force him into growing that part of his game, because he can make that first read and get a win every time. It was pretty similar in the Nebraska game. So in your mind, is that some of it? And if they can get a couple of games where he does have to do some of this, that it would prime him a little more, and he's kind of at a disadvantage just because of their opponents?
I think that's all really fair. I think the problem for Ohio State to some degree is they're used to being able to kind of control the game. And even last year, they had a better run game, and the offensive run really kept teams from ever being able to play them straight up. I also think it's a problem with college football. I mean, defense has fallen off, and when you get to elite games, you get to an elite defense, it's rare enough that it's almost always a shock. And so many teams are so bad in terms of defense that they just can't even, hold serve in these sort of matchups. And next thing you know, You play a Georgia in 2018 and you look terrible. You play Clemson in 2018 and you look terrible. Um, and I absolutely think that's part of Field's problem. And there's some really good defenses in the Big Ten, but like we've talked about a lot, the Big Ten is a more run focused league. There's nothing wrong with that. People, want to rag on it all the time. The physicality shows up. It showed up last year with Minnesota thumping Auburn. They were a more physical football team than Auburn was. But what happens a lot is even the better defenses in the Big Ten are sometimes not great pass defenses. And I think maybe some of it's rushing the passer, some of it's secondary and whatnot. And I think it gives limited opportunities for Ohio State to sort of learn those problems. You get, and as a quarterback, one, you don't learn lessons, and two, you get bad habits because you get so used to having the play there, you just assume it's going to be there all the time, and you forget that you have to make reads. And at some point, you just stop making reads as a matter of habit.
I'll also add that as a coaching staff, you get away from, or you never get into a groove of having that bag of tricks and plays that you can go to when you do get into this kind of grind. And we're over talking it a little bit because they still scored 40 plus, which is generally what we say about all elite offenses is they're going to need that. My concern is, I think Indiana is a good defense. I don't think they're a great defense. My concern is what happens if you score 35 and you have a team on the other side that can bombs away. I do think that this is probably showed Ohio State in a worse light than they actually are defensively and offensively. And I think they let off the gas a little bit when they got that lead. So that it's not entirely fair. It may not matter though, because it looks like Indiana might be the team they're going to face in the Big Ten championship game. And that's an opportunity for them to look. I think Ohio State's still playoff bound. There's no question about that. But I think that will be an opportunity for them to build some confidence going into the playoffs if they can put a hammer down on a team like Indiana. Or, I don't think beating a Northwestern does much for them. I think that showing that they can adjust as a coaching staff and playing this Indiana team again, because Wisconsin offensively is never going to threaten them. This is who they want to play going into the playoffs for the reasons we just said. Would you agree or disagree?
I would probably agree with that, yeah.
So before we wrap this up, because we didn't want to make this too long, give me your kind of final takeaways. Is there anything that really scared you about this game Saturday? Are you dropping them in your rankings, that sort of thing? And we'll wrap it up.
I think my final takeaway from this is I do think there are genuine issues in the secondary in terms of their ability to cover, their scheme issues. But at the end of the day, it's still an elite offense. They're still going to score 40 plus. I think Indiana is a very good defense, and it didn't matter that much in this game. Even with 3 interceptions, Ohio State still scores 42. So my ultimate takeaway is our assertion holds. If you're going to be in an elite offense in a playoff level, you have to be able to score 40 plus points because elite teams are going to put up 45 in that kind of a game. And like we said with Indiana, we didn't think they'd play it close. They got a lot of breaks to get to 42-35. But the reality was still that Indiana really wasn't a team that, even with everything that was going wrong for Ohio State, Indiana still wasn't going to score 40 plus, or still was not going to be able to quite get to that threshold. Ohio State is still in a position to get to the playoffs and is still in a position to win games or the championship in the playoff because they're the kind of team that can score 45 on anyone in college football. And that's the thing that really defines you as having a chance right now.
Yeah, and I'll also add, I think in some ways it bodes well. I would much rather have a defense that has a game where they're giving up bombs, because that's one thing that you have to fix, versus having a game where they're giving up death by 1,000 cuts where they can't get a team off the field, where it's every play is 4 and 5 yards. They're giving up, 7 of 9 in third downs, and they're letting a team consistently drive the field, because that usually speaks to a lot of issues that are permeating your defense and not just one issue that, you take the bombs away from this game and it's blowout city against a good team. So I think there's time to adjust on that. All right, let us know in the comments if you are an Ohio State fan and you're freaking out a little bit, or if this is just one of those games, you're going to have one every year, and under Urban Meyer, it was getting blown out by Iowa, and now it's a 7-point win over a good team, and you'll take that all day, every day. Let us know what you think. Thanks so much, y'all. Have a great week, and God bless.